And what I've also has struck me probably since writing the book is how many of his songs are ghost stories. County Fair is a kind of ghost story. It's time, and so one of the things that I talk about in the book is I compare him with Emily Dickinson. No person who's ever compared him with Emily Dickinson, but there's a Dickinson poem which is called "Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me." She manipulates time, so you get a shiver because you think, oh, it was a moment and it's gone. And Springsteen in County Fair, he's talking about this girl, and then time sort of collapses and you realize that it was a long time ago. And in the Tucson train song, you think there's nobody going to turn up there. This person he's waiting for isn't really there. It's a ghost song.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson, and we are doing a timey-wimey episode, which are some of my favorites. It is my morning, it's my guest afternoon, and we are here to talk a little Bruce with Gavin Cologne Brookes. How are you doing, Gavin?
I'm doing fine, Jesse. How are you?
I am great. Tell us a little about yourself. Give us your elevator pitch.
That wasn't one of your questions you were going to ask.
No, I'm sorry. Just to tell us
Okay.
a little about you.
Okay, so I currently live in Paris and Wiltshire, but for many years I was a professor of American literature and teaching literature, teaching French novels as well, and teaching creative writing. And so
Oh,
that's how I got
interesting.
into this. Yeah.
What uh what were some of your favorite novels to talk about?
I loved talking about Madame I had a module where I taught Madame Bovary, Flaubert's Madame
Okay.
Bovary,
Yeah.
Stendhal, The Red and the Black,
Mm-hmm.
uh, Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, and Tolstoy's Anna Karenina. And I quickly learned to put Anna Karenina first because it's very long and the students wouldn't otherwise read it.
Oh, that's interesting. Very nice. Are you no longer teaching?
I took severance about 3 years ago, but I also paint. So I'm
Okay.
now painting most of the time in Paris or when I'm here.
Oh,
So that's the main thing. I mean, the other thing about me, I suppose, is I was once a teenager
yeah.
who was hoping to achieve something, and Bruce was very significant in getting me to do that.
Well, I can't wait to hear that story. I always like to start though. How you been doing during the pandemic? Things are
Um,
starting to settle down a little bit normal here in the US, but how's
right.
it going where you are?
It's been in Paris. Things have opened up, so it's actually quite interesting because there are no tourists,
Hmm.
so I can go to the Louvre and the Musée d'Orsay and everywhere, and it's not crowded. So I'm experiencing a different kind of Paris to the one that you would normally have. And Wiltshire is just quiet, rural.
Hmm.
So I haven't been. It hasn't had a big effect. I mean, I spend people who write books and so on spend a lot of the time on their own anyway.
Yeah.
So it hasn't made a huge. How about you? What do
Um,
you think?
so my day job is I run a dispatch center for for the recreation vehicles, RVs,
Okay.
Airstreams, and
Yeah.
mobile homes. And um, so last summer we there was an explosion here in the U.S. because one of the safest ways to travel is to either rent an RV or buy an RV because you're self-contained.
Yeah.
So my business has been crazy. So I've been back at work since May of 2020, and in a lot of ways, except for having to wear a mask all the time, my life was pretty normal.
Hmm.
A couple months ago, I had a little bit of health issue, and that I've talked about it. So, but I'm back at work now, and it's busy, and we're getting okay. And I have I have tickets to see a singer-songwriter, Sarah Hickman, who we adore, has been a longtime fan of, and we actually became friends. She is playing at a small little pub at the end of July. We're going to go see her. That'll be the first live music we've seen in forever. And then a singer-songwriter named Marsha Ball, who is from New Orleans. We're seeing her in August. So, slowly but surely things are getting back to normal.
That's the big difference, isn't it? Missing live music and live sport for me.
Yes.
Yeah, those two
Yeah.
things.
In
Yeah,
fact, I have tickets to go see the Texas Rangers baseball game like at the end of August. Last year they opened a new park and no one got to go see it
right.
except the media. And so this year we're going to go, and yeah, you're right. Music and sports,
Yeah, yeah.
and
Paris Saint-Germain, the Paris soccer team, they owe me money
oh
because
yeah,
they got tickets. I hope I'll use them sometime.
that's good. That's good. Well, let's go back to the beginning. Talk about where you grew up and what kind of music was your family musical? Did they listen to a lot of music as a kid? Were you the household full of music?
That's a very interesting question, and I would say that really it was not a musical household.
Okay.
And that the whole point was that music was this world that opened up that was not, not where I was. It was
Wow.
going
Okay.
somewhere else. And so I was thinking, what did my parents listen to? Well, they listened to things like Nightingale sang in Berkeley Square, sort of 1940s song, and that kind of thing. But we had an attic upstairs at the top of this
Okay.
house in the English countryside, and there was an old turntable and some 78s, which is an old kind of record that
Yes.
I didn't really listen to, but there were two singles, and I listened to those. I suppose they sort of six, seven, eight, nine all the time. These same two songs or four songs, the two sides, and one was Nancy Sinatra, Sugar Town,
Okay.
uh, and the other, which is a very surreal song when you're six, seven, eight,
Sure.
and the other one was Chubby Checker.
Okay.
In particular, it would have been the twist, and on the B side was Let's Twist Again, like we did last summer.
Uh-huh.
And I vividly remember sitting up in this, it was a kind of tower attic, listening to Let's Twist Again, like we did last summer. And I think Bruce talks at some point about the sadness that you can hear in some of these songs beneath the merriment. And
Hmm.
that was very much the case, because it's last summer, that whole sense of
Yeah.
time passing and so on. So that was my that was it. I would retreat to the attic and listen to these two songs, these two records, and in time, my parents would buy some records here and there, but we didn't connect really
Okay.
uh, in that sense in terms of music.
So you mentioned a few minutes ago and becoming a teenager and how Bruce became an influence in your life. So let's delve into that a little bit. So um, all of us, at least in my case, right? My parents were very much into country music, and when I was a teenager, I discovered AM rock and roll, and kind of found my own, niche. Though never totally abandoned country music because it was in my blood, for my parents. But talk about finding other music. You move on, I assume, from the two records, and talk about what kind of music you're liking, and then how did you discover Bruce?
So what happened was that as a teenager, I discovered Buddy Holly
Ah,
and
greatness.
and the Everly Brothers. And I was brought up in the UK, obviously, and so to me, this was my sort of introduction to American music, apart from Chubby Checker, and then Eddie Cochran.
Okay.
Eddie Cochran, he died in a car wreck about 2 miles from where I'm talking now,
Oh, interesting.
in Chippenham in Wiltshire. And in 1960, so I was born 1961, so he was one of these sort of figures from the past. And then it was that American music, it was Buddy Holly and Everly Brothers, that brought me to America at the age of 18, even though
Hmm.
obviously I listened to the Beatles and the Stones
Sure.
and Eric Clapton and so on. And I came to the States thinking, I think, that I would discover, I used to watch things like Grease and Happy Days and all these
Yeah.
things. And I came there assuming that somehow the America I discovered would be the America from the music and from popular culture. And I used to sit on the Greyhound bus for years, traveling around the 48 conterminous states, listening to music that I picked up along the way. And that would be Lynyrd Skynyrd and Neil Young and Creedence Clearwater and Willie Nelson, Bob Seger, Supertramp, a UK band.
Hmm.
I remember sitting on a bus listening to Rainy Night in Georgia, Randy Crawford. And so,
Wow.
and then Harry Chapin, a song called Greyhound. And so, first of all, it was always an escape. And in the end, it was me actually escaping with a soundtrack, listening to this kind of music.
So my first thought is the Simon and Garfunkel looking for,
Yeah,
all here look for America.
yeah,
Because,
yeah.
he and, as the singer, he's talking about being in the bus and
Mm.
listening. So yeah, that's immediately,
Happy I'm
um,
Lost. Yeah,
yeah,
Michigan. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Mm.
The, what, brought you, first off, I did not discover Buddy Holly till the Gary Busey movie.
Right.
And that was, I think a lot of people found him that way and has since have loved that music. And then the Everly Brothers, absolutely just a beautiful harmony.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could see how both of those. What brought you to the US?
So I worked at a summer camp in
Okay.
Stony Lake, Michigan,
Okay.
and then another one in the Poconos in
Okay.
Pennsylvania. It was a scheme that you could, they paid your flight and everything, and you just came over
Yeah.
and worked there. So I would arrive in America having watched Rebel Without a Cause, and I would
Yeah.
wear a white T-shirt and a red jacket, and
Sure.
I was sort of living those things. But there was one other thing, and obviously I saw American graffiti and that sort of thing. But there was a counterpoint to that, and that was Bob Dylan, who was none of these things,
Right.
and was very bad for my teenage years. Really, he made me very antisocial, and so I started wearing mirror glasses and trying to look melancholy, and so on. And in particular, but he did have what all this music shared was this sense of a kind of lostness and a kind of place elsewhere. And in particular, his song "Something There Is About You," where he has the lines, "Thought I'd shaken the wonder and the phantoms of my youth, rainy days on the Great Lakes, walking the hills of old Duluth."
Mm.
So again, I thought, well, I must go. And part of the point of sitting on a Greyhound was to go to places like Duluth and walk in the hills, and walk along the old canal and try and experience a simple twist of fate, and so on.
So I'm a big fan of the Magic Act Penn and Teller, and Penn Jillette does a podcast, and he talks a lot about as a youth he listened to Bob Dylan, and he still is a massive Dylan fan, and he talks about he wanted to do everything that his hero did, run the rails and go
Yeah,
hitchhiking.
yeah,
And he said that later he found out that Bob did none of that, that he was
right,
just making up the stories,
yeah,
but it
yeah.
felt true to him. So I think that's interesting that you're coming to a different country to kind of find yourself, and using that music to discover
That's
who
right.
you want to be, not just now but when you grow up.
That's right. Because you don't have, especially if you come to a new country, you don't have parents, you don't have
Yeah.
siblings. You are judged entirely on as a stranger.
Yeah,
That's
sure.
yeah, completely. And so it was at. Shall I explain how Bruce comes into this then?
Please.
So at I guess I heard Born to Run in the summer of '79 in Michigan, but I didn't. It was background, and then I worked in this camp in the Poconos, and there was a counselor called Dogie, and he gave me The Wild, the Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle. He said, "Oh, you should
Okay.
listen to this," because he was from New Jersey. He said, "This is
Yeah.
the stuff." And I still remember putting that on in the cabin and the first strumming of the Street Shuffle. I still remember that first moment and thinking, wow, this is something different. So I came home to the UK and I bought, and at this time I was drifting. You know, I was unemployed. I just worked in the
Yeah.
summers. I hadn't done. I dropped out of high school. You know, I just didn't know what I was doing. And so I came home and I bought Asbury Park and Born to Run and Darkness, and I started studying at night school. And I listened to him on a tape deck that was stuck on the dashboard, and every time I turned a corner, it would kind of crash off. And I played, in particular, Born to Run, but probably Darkness on the Edge of Town more than anything, traveling back and forth. And through that, you know, I got into college and so on. And there's certain lyrics from that I think just changed my life. I think the song Badlands really changed my life. You know, all that stuff about trouble in the heartland, head-on collisions, smashing in
Yeah.
my guts. And then in particular, the lines, obviously, I don't give a damn about the played out old scenes,
Yeah.
the in-betweens and so on. And then talk about a dream, try to make it real. You wake up in the night with a fear so real, spend your life waiting for a moment that just won't come. Don't waste your time waiting. My God, that was such a spur to actually do something, you know.
You know, Gavin, there's a fairly new podcast called That One Lyric,
Okay.
where you know, where you the host has a Springsteen fan and they pick one lyric that is vital to them. And you just did that, right? That talk about a dream, try to make it real. Um, a- and I know Bruce would probably say, "Don't put that junk on me," you know, don't put that crap on me. But the reality is, you know, as you explained, that lyric inspired you to, you know, not wait for things, wait for things. Better Days is my version
Okay.
of that, where you said, you know, waiting for my life to become, well, it's all go slipping away, you
Yeah.
know. And so I often talk about Better Days as it is to me, the song is life is happening now and you can't wait for better days. You have to
Yeah.
make the better days now, no matter what you're going through.
That's right.
And Badlands is another perfect example of that.
Mm. But I mean, the slightly odd thing is that what I was doing was studying Elizabethan history and
Yeah.
literature. I was doing very you know, un-Springsteen things.
Yes.
But you know, at that age, you are soaking up these things. And
Yeah.
this book, the Stendhal's The Red and the Black, is a French novel from 1831, but it has a character in it called Julian Sorel who is just like the character in Badlands, because he's rushing to the future, trying to become somebody. So this is it goes right back, you know, it's just what it is to be a teenager, I suppose.
No, that's very fascinating. And the idea that, you know, a lot of Springsteen's music are universal themes, which shows, right? Like a French novel and Bruce, you would not think those two together. And then here they were, you know, actually you felt like that character could be a character in a Springsteen song.
Sure, sure, that's right. And I mean, it takes all sorts of forms. So on my study door, I have a little cutout of somebody. It's an advertisement, and it's saying, "I saw Springsteen last night, and now I'm inspired to sell houses." So, yeah. In other words, it doesn't matter what your job is, but if it makes you want to be the best at what you're doing, you know, and to fulfill your potential, that's what he inspires, I think, in people.
Absolutely. Um, so I always like to preface this question, Gavin, that I don't think the amount of times you've seen Bruce live is a fair barometer of how big of a fan you are, because there are people who are massive fans that have never had a chance to see him.
Sure.
But have you got to see him live? And if so, do you count how many?
Absolutely. I have a list, and it's not that many, but it is each one is pivotal.
Okay.
because the first one was 1981 in London, and it was it was a show when it was supposed to be April, and it was pushed back 2 months because of exhaustion. And so the person who had the ticket couldn't go and gave it to me, and I was in the third row. And I guess he was 30 something, and I would have been 20 maybe. And that was life changing again, because I was close up, and I was able to call out for a song, and
Hmm.
I called out for Backstreets, and he was playing The River stuff. So
Okay.
he looked a little bit fed up with the fact that I was calling out for this song, and then other people picked up on it, and he came up and he pointed at me, and he said, "We'll get that one for you later." And it was like, I don't know if you
Oh,
know,
wow.
it was, if you know Michelangelo's Adam and God in
Yeah,
the Sistine Chapel.
exactly.
It was,
Yeah.
this shit. I get the shiver when I think about it
Oh,
now.
sure.
And so that was the spur. And then I didn't see him for a long time. Well, 4 years, and I saw him during the Born to Run tour in Syracuse in upstate New York, where I was doing an MA. And we were miles back, and there was no connection. And I thought,
Yeah.
it didn't work at all. So I left off for a long time, and then took my daughters in 2008 to Cardiff, and again we were right back. It didn't have the right kind of impact.
Yeah.
So we went again to Coventry in the UK in 2013, and we waited for about 7 hours to get into the mosh pit,
Okay.
because I just realized that you had to be up close. You had to
Sure.
be up close. And I was so exhilarated by that show that instead of getting on with my work as an academic, I spent the next few days reading Springsteen, watching Springsteen, and I thought, well, I'll have to write a book.
Oh, wow.
And I went off to play soccer, and I played, better than I've ever played probably. And somebody said, "What's the matter?" I said, "Well, I've just seen Springsteen." I was kind of buzzing from this thing. So that's where the book came from. And then in 2016, I experimented in Paris by seeing it from further back and the mosh pit.
Hmm.
And I talk about that in the book because something slightly embarrassing happened, but I'll come to that maybe later. And
Okay.
then Broadway,
Yes.
2018, went with my daughter, and we waited for 4 hours on the sidewalk. And I'd bought a copy of the autobiography, and I had a flyer for the book. And Patty took the flyer, and we told him about this, and he came up, and I said, "I've written a book about you." He signed the Born to Run. I said, "I've written a book about you." He said, "That's so kind of you." And so what he didn't know is that this was decades after I'd asked for a song before I'd even started a career.
Yeah.
And so, again, I wrote about that.
Well, talk about the book.
The book. Okay, so you jump forward. I've got all my questions in front. You jump forward.
Yeah. Well, it's a conversation. So,
Yeah,
but no, I just, and we can go to the book later.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, so what happened with the book was that I had written books on American novelist William Styron, who wrote Sophie's Choice, and I'd written Joyce Carol Oates, who's written lots of stuff and happens also to be Catholic origin and working in New Jersey. So that was kind of interesting.
Okay, sure.
And I thought, well, what can I write about? I must write this book about Springsteen. And I thought, he's an American writer. I can do that. And so, but I had to make it fresh, and it had to be something that made sense in terms of what I could do. I was quite influenced by a book by Dan Kavicki called Tramps Like Us from 1998. It was about music and meaning among Springsteen fans. And so I wanted that whole element to sort of come into it. One of the things I'm quite proud about is in chapter 4 of the book, which is called Of Time and the River, which is about Springsteen live. When I was in Paris, I asked the names of the people all around me in the concert, and I put them in the book.
Oh, how nice.
Yeah, so they're all sort of get acknowledged in it. But so it's a kind of hybrid book, because I use my background. So I start with, going to Asbury Park, being an outsider looking in. I'm very aware I'm not, from New Jersey. I'm not a musician. I'm not American, and so on. And then I write about American literature and Springsteen. And then I write about the strong change that I think came about. I write about something called multiple selves, which is that Springsteen had I think it was a kind of crisis with Born in the USA, where there was for me there was a disconnect, and I felt that was happening possibly with him too. And that's where you separate his career into different parts, I think there. And then I have a chapter called After Springsteen about the effect of Springsteen on people's lives. But the central chapter for me is of Time in the River, which starts with going past Eddie Cochran's memorial in my hometown, just at the very moment that Springsteen is actually live singing Summertime Blues.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was. I was in a rainstorm, and my headlights hit the memorial, and on came Springsteen, with that beat and that song.
That's a surreal moment.
It was, yeah. So, and that was great because I put all that in the book. So the book is, it's memoir, it's travel,
Okay.
but it's also critique.
Yeah, and the name of the book is American Lonesome,
Yeah.
The Work of Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah.
And that's it is on my to-do list to read it, and I wanted to kind of visit with you first and then pick it up and kind of read it. It sounds amazing.
I loved writing it. When you teach, if you enjoy teaching, presumably the students enjoy it too. And so if you enjoy writing a book, then readers should enjoy it. I was very conscious in writing it that all kinds of people from all sorts of backgrounds are interested in Springsteen. And so some chapters will suit people more than others. Some of them are to do with philosophy, some of them are memoir, and so on. But I was always just thinking, well, I'm a fan, and I'll just write from my perspective, I suppose. And the other thing that was important to me is that the cover is because I'm a painter too, and the cover is my oil painting.
Oh, okay.
And that came about. I just, I couldn't use an image because of copyright issues and so on. So I watched lots of videos, and I kind of created an image out of that. So it's a kind of original image, and it's what I like about it is that it doesn't show him with an instrument. It shows him sort of introspectively. He could be a writer. He's a writer as well as being a musician and a performer.
Yeah. When you read his autobiography, give me the two perspectives as a fan, but also as someone who studies and I'm trying to think the right word, critiques literature as a living. So can you give me both perspectives, or are they the same for you, his autobiography?
I think that he writes very well. Somebody did say to me, well, maybe there are too many exclamation marks, but
Yeah.
The main thing about him is that he has honed his writing skills for decades.
Yes.
I mean, he has those lines. I always think of the line. I'm not sure. I can't think of the line itself, but in he's singing about the lights on the Jersey Shore, and you get this incredible impression of the reflection of the lights from the pier in the water.
Yeah.
He's very, very good at just creating this sense of putting you there. At the moment, I'm watching a documentary about Hemingway.
Okay.
One thing that they say about Hemingway is he puts you in that place and in those feelings. And Springsteen can do that. And therefore, when I think of Born to Run, I think of that early passage where he's talking about being a child and imagining, his street is, it's the Nevadas, the Sierra Nevadas, or wherever it happens to be. And he's able to put you in that child's perspective. And then, of course, with the relationship with his father and so on. So it's an exceptionally well written book, I think.
Gavin, I had a writer named Ron Martz on this show. He's actually been on two or three times, and he has written. You can name a popular superhero from the Marvel or DC universe, and he's written them.
Okay.
He is just he's amazing, and he talked about that Springsteen and Stephen King were his two biggest influences. And we were talking about, I don't know, being in the UK, if you've got to hear as many as we in America, but the From My Home to Yours, the little radio shows that he's done for E Street Radio. Have you gotten to hear some of them?
I listened to one through the night. I was shattered, but then
Okay.
I could listen to them recorded. No, they're
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Ron said, we know he's a great storyteller. Why are we shocked that he's able to tell a story in this medium? Right. And I think the same thing, right? That um, I thought the book was, I thought at times, and I say this with great love in my heart, Bruce cannot be a very good interviewer at times. When people are interviewing him, he can tend to laugh at his own jokes and kind of, you could see he's uncomfortable talking about himself, at least in early interviews. I think with the Letter to You publicity, he seemed to be really more comfortable with it. And I think the podcast with President Obama, he really opened up a lot about himself. And I think the book helped him. I think, yes, it is. Um, and, supposedly he just started writing. And, the story is right. He just showed up at the publicist and was like, hey, I think you're my publicist. Would you be interested in publishing this? So I think it's a very real book, and it really, he shares a lot about himself.
He does. No, I think when you were saying that, there's a particular interview he does in about 1998 in Los
Hmm.
Angeles, I think.
Yeah.
And there's a little nervous laugh that he has all the time.
Hmm.
You're right. You're right. He's not comfortable. But then,
Yeah.
I think obviously a stable home and children growing up, and Patty
Yeah.
in particular. I think that's all. He's very comfortable in his own skin, obviously now.
I think he is now, and I I am glad, at the same time unhappy, that he changed the Broadway play. This latest revival, he's adjusted, made a couple of new songs, and changed some of the dialogue. I am thrilled that he made it more personal. Just unhappy that I'm not going to get to go see the new show.
I have to say, I mean, I've heard a couple of Ken Rosen and so on. I've read a
Yeah.
couple of reviews, and he was, when I saw it in, I think it was about April of
Yeah.
2018. He was openly, if not crying, he was very. He either had a terrible cold,
Uh-huh.
or he was really quite choked up. He talked about his mother, uh,
Yes.
and that she could only dance, and her Alzheimer's. He talked about his um, Catholicism too.
Hmm.
In fact, he ended with the Lord's Prayer,
Yes, he did. Yeah.
which
Which,
which rather surprised me actually. But
yes.
and he said they got me,
Yeah.
and so it was personal. And he was singing the song for his mother about uh, what's that one?
The Wish.
Yeah, The Wish, exactly, the
Yeah.
guitar. And I thought he's not going to get through it.
Yeah.
I really thought that. And so, but he has always said, hasn't he, that it's an act,
Right.
but it also has to come from within, and it has to be authentic too. You don't give all of yourself, but you do give a lot of yourself. And that was the case with Badlands. He's singing about
Yes.
it himself.
Yes.
Doing so, he's giving it to other people too.
Yeah, Gavin, the joke, right, is once you learn how to fake sincerity, you've got it made. The reality is you can only fake so much, and yes, as he talked about his magic trick and the persona of someone who's never worked a regular day job his whole life, but has written all about these. I think. Um, there's that great line in Storytellers, I'm going to have it wrong, where he said, he's talking about the meaning of the lyrics, and he says, was I thinking about this maybe. Was I trying to do this on purpose? Maybe. But was I feeling it? Absolutely 100%.
Mm.
And that's
And
good.
I think the revelations about the depression and so on
Yes.
were absolutely no surprise to me,
Right.
because he talked earlier in interviews about a kind of abuse of his self-abuse, giving
Yeah.
everything. And of course, it's like a kind of veering truck, because the higher you go, the harder you're going to fall as well. And
Yeah.
so if you've got that ecstasy, you've got to have the come down from that. And so that was those legendary 4-hour shows and so on.
Yeah.
And so he's managed to find that kind of balance, I suppose, hasn't he? As we hope we all do. Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's go back to the music. And I always like to ask, are there songs or albums that mean something to you, and why? And of course, the quick answer is all of them, right? But we each have certain, I think, songs or albums that we go to at different points in our lives.
Sure, sure. So I made a list.
Okay, good. Thank
If I
you.
can find ones that uh, I would say, when I was young, Backstreets was. I went when I went to Asbury Park. I went to the Born to Run house,
Okay,
and he talks about being in a beach house and so on.
right.
And, it was such a revelation, because it's such a tiny house, and yet
Yes,
it's explosively big sound that comes out. So Backstreets was really important, and Jungle Land, because of the line "warm beer, drinking warm beer in the soft summer rain." I mean, I spent a long time after listening to that going and getting a warm beer, and sitting on the hood of a car drinking it in the soft summer rain, because
yes, yeah.
like the
That is such an image. I had a guest that said that she took pictures of um, her children sitting on a car with a beer, just as a Christmas card once. The other thing I wanted to mention, and I apologize, audience, I'm kind of lurching the car back, so hang tight. But I just recently had this, and the episode has not come out, Gavin, but I've come to a revelation, and that if you grew up on the East Coast, there's a more than 50% chance that you discovered Bruce through a summer camp. Because as I've interviewed these people,
interesting.
there
Yeah,
is an interesting theme, and I just had a guest talk about it, that there was a counselor that brought his his stereo system from home, and he would play Bruce Springsteen.
yeah,
And I think it's interesting that here's a kid from the UK
yeah, yeah.
and discovers Bruce at an East Coast summer camp. So there it is. There are themes that I discover doing this podcast, and I
That's
think that's fascinating that you kind of. I just recently had that, and so I hate to go back to that, but I think that's fascinating that just by the
Well,
sheer.
I suppose I entered the culture. That was the
Yeah,
point. Somebody there.
exactly. And I'm sure you would have found Bruce, you would have heard Bruce's music in other ways, but maybe not, it would not have had the emotional effect of at that age and at that point you're away from your family in a new country and you hear this voice, this guy that's all about, how did John Stewart said that um when you listen to a Bruce Springsteen song, you stop being a loser, but you start becoming a loser in an epic tale. you
Yeah.
know.
I think that it was also somebody, this particular counselor, Dogie, saying to me, "Pay attention to this."
Yeah,
I probably didn't, sort of, it didn't hit me until I went and actually then listened to some albums. Let me give
yeah.
you about 5 other songs. I'm not going to
Please
talk
do.
about, and you can pick up on one if you like. So
Okay.
what I was thinking, "Open All Night," the Nebraska version and the Dublin version.
And isn't
Uh,
that interesting that it's the same song, but has
Absolutely.
such a different, I don't want to say meaning, but a feel. I mean, the Dublin version is such almost a joyous celebration, and
Yeah.
then Nebraska is not that.
That's right. That's right. And
Yeah,
that's fascinating the way he does that. And then I really like some of these songs that you don't that are quite obscure, like
yeah.
County Fair and A Time That Never Was. I play A Time That Never Was quite a lot. Uh,
Okay.
and what I've also has struck me probably since writing the book is how many of his songs are ghost stories.
Hmm.
Tucson Plain, County Fair is a kind of ghost story.
Yeah.
He manipulates time, and so one of the things that I talk about in the book is I compare him with Emily Dickinson. I'm
Okay.
probably the only person who's ever compared him with Emily Dickinson, but there's a Dickinson poem which is called "Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me," and
Right.
she manipulates time, so you get a shiver because you think, oh, it was a moment and it's gone. And Springsteen in County Fair, he's talking about this girl, and then time sort of collapses and you realize that it was a long time ago. And in the Tucson train song, you think there's nobody going to turn up there. This person he's waiting for isn't really there. It's a ghost song. So those all strike me.
Let's talk about that for a minute. Um, it I am also a Harry Chapin fan,
Okay.
and one of my favorite songs is his is "Corey's Coming."
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with the song,
That's a good song, yeah.
but it is, and he doesn't answer the question: is Corey real? Is
Right.
she a ghost? Is she a figment of the person's imagination?
Mm.
And the album Legends of the Lost and Found, Harry does a live version that kind of has an extended verse. And Tucson Train is one of my favorite songs of his last two albums, and we're going to talk about those in a little bit. But I love the idea. This is there is a lot of Bruce's work that is very cinematic, but to this is this. I've screwed up. I've done everything wrong, and you just picture the protagonist um, begging his partner. And I say that because of a friend of mine who's been on the podcast very much, Bella Pori, who is a lesbian, said that she could make the argument that almost every song on Western Stars is could be viewed from a gay or lesbian perspective. She's like,
Yeah.
so you picture this the singer has screwed up royally and has reached out to his partner and begged, just give me one weekend, just give me one weekend. I will put you in a hotel, I will put you in a separate bedroom, we don't have, but just let me show you how I've changed. And I love the fact that we don't know if they show up on that Tucson train.
Right.
And we're going to ask at the end the Mary question, and I'm looking forward to hearing your answer. But that's a similar question. I'm an optimist. I believe their partner does show up. And do they get back together? I don't know. But I think the idea is the singer had the chance to prove that I'm a better person now, that I can show her a man can change, is just fascinating.
But at the end of the song, you hear the ticking of the clock.
Yes.
And that's quite a melancholy way
Yes,
to
it
end.
is.
It's Twilight Zone. It's Twilight
Yes,
Zone.
it is very much Twilight Zone.
But on
Yes.
that point about sexuality, I address that to some extent in American Lonesome because I'd read someone had written a very good essay about homoeroticism and so on.
Yeah.
And in Backstreets, it's you can it really is quite difficult to say for certain whether Terry is male or female,
Yes, it is.
isn't it? And
Yeah.
it just depends on which part of the lyrics you're looking at.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. And then there's the whole the onstage act with Clarence.
Yeah. So if you want, early back, and I can send you the link if you like, Bella joined me and she said, here are Springsteen's 5 gayest songs. and
Right.
and she went through and explained, why they were. And there is an article somewhere where how Bruce Springsteen is a lesbian icon, which
Mm.
I find fascinating.
I mean,
That
what he can do is, it's like, it's this idea of negative capability that you get in Shakespeare. Because he is open to all these different experiences. Um, he, you can read into it or take
Yes,
out your own life experience, whether you're selling houses or it's, you're a lesbian. I mean, it doesn't
yeah,
matter, does it?
absolutely. All right, so I hope I didn't cut you off. Did you get through the songs you wanted to discuss?
I would. Very interested. I'll just say one other, which is, obviously everyone likes The Promise,
Yes.
and in The Promise, but I also like, Land of Hope and Dreams.
Yeah.
And one thing that interests me there is that you've got the Springsteen who is riding the wheels, and then you've got the Springsteen in The Promise who's getting splashed by the wheels
Yes.
on the roadside, and that's a
Right.
nice kind of light and dark,
That
element.
is. Um, Land of Hope and Dreams probably is my favorite Springsteen song.
I do like
Um,
American Land, actually.
huh?
I love that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I love the idea
Yeah.
that, and I had a buddy of mine who said that American Land and Land of Hope and Dreams are the songs that many people think Born in the USA is.
Mm.
That, that those are songs of celebrations of America and what we could do, versus, Born in the USA is not, despite it being played when fireworks go off on the 4th of July. That's great.
Yeah,
Um,
it's quite. I mean, he says everyone's allowed on the train, but you just,
yes,
there are certain, uh, certain people in political life who he
yes.
might not really want on the train.
No, he probably wouldn't. And, there is this whole, um, Bound for Glory, is the song where, this is the grandfather of that song where it talked about, that, um, Bound for Glory, that they talk about all the people not included on the train. That
Mm.
this is, for, and Bruce's open value. And I often joke to my wife the reason she doesn't like Land of Hope and Dreams is because it's got the word war in it. And she punches me, lovingly every time. But I love the idea that all, to get political, right, or to get a little religious, you know, all have sinned and come short of the glory of God, right? A Bible verse that was, if you were raised as a Protestant, was, given into you. I was raised as a Baptist and converted to Catholicism, uh, because my wife was Catholic, and we went through this. But the idea that all are welcome, that saints and sinners, gamblers, um, the brokenhearted, is a very, what we want the American dream to be about.
Yeah. And he's read Whitman.
Yeah,
He's very well read, and that's Whitman. That's all that comes out there.
yeah,
And the final two songs, that the revelations for me in Letter to You were If I Was a Priest,
yes,
the early song, and also Song for Orphans, which I immediately thought, Simple Twist of Fate. He takes Dylan and turns it into something else.
yeah.
But, yeah, great song. I mean, If I Were a Priest, and that line about Jesus at the door, in his, in his cowboy outfit and everything, is amazing, brilliant.
Well, yeah, I don't know what the song means, but I know that I love it. And it was one of the songs that I would play on repeat when I first got the album.
Yeah.
Just the way it's built and put together, it's absolutely amazing. What are your thoughts on, Western Stars and Letter to You?
I went to see Western Stars, in France, actually, and, was
Yeah,
very interested in talking to people there, and I enjoyed that, and I listened to those songs. I think Letter to You is the one that, it's such a summing up in
yes,
some
it
ways,
is.
because that's what it is. People write him letters. My book was a letter to him in a way, a letter to other
Yeah,
people. Um, and and his songs are taken by individuals and
they are,
treated.
aren't they?
And there's an Emily Dickinson line, which is, "This is my letter to the world, who never wrote to me." I bet he knows that too.
Hmm.
Um, so it's that intimacy, isn't it? Letter, you can't get more intimate than "Letter to You."
Yeah, I
So,
do not think it will be the last album
no,
he
I
does, or a Street Blues does, but in a way, it does feel like he's summarizing his career so far.
yeah,
Yeah,
and it's retrospective too, looking back to if I was a priest and so
yeah.
on, acknowledging people like Dylan and so on. So I was very struck. This is a bit of a tangent, but when I was writing the book, somebody said to me, "Oh, do listen to Van Morrison, Astral Weeks." And apparently, at some point, Morrison said, "Oh, Springsteen, he's the guy who plagiarized me."
Oh,
It's very interesting. If you listen to Astral Weeks, you can hear where a song like Backstreets has partly come from.
oh,
There's a
interesting.
reference to a fortune teller. It's a different kind of music, but it's clearly was influential on him. Yeah,
Well, and right, I think that's all musicians, all creative people. We are um, influenced. I know that I haven't told this story too often on the podcast, but when my son Chris was very young, he was in Cub Scouts, and I was a Cub Scout leader. And there was every year you have the blue and gold banquet, which is basically a celebration of Cub Scouts birthday. And so and you know, my decorations for the table for my boys was just horrible. It didn't look good and anything. And even my wife, when she showed up, was like, "Really? You didn't do anything better?" Like, because everyone else was elaborate. And, I was feeling bad about myself. And one of the fellow leaders, Karen, looked at me and she goes, "First off, you're a dad and you have to, we grade you at a curve. Secondly, you cannot imagine how important it is to your son and the rest of the young men you're helping that a father left work to go work on this. And third, she says, good Cub Scout leaders come up with new ideas. Great Cub Scout leaders steal from other people." And I've used that often in my life, that good leaders come up with new ideas. Great leaders see what worked for someone else, borrows that, makes it their own, and do that. So I
and
think you could say the same thing for artists, right?
sure. And that's the jazz aesthetic. That
Yes.
one instrument will pick up on another riff and do it.
Yes. Right.
And Springsteen talks in Born to Run about the circle in the sand. The
Yes.
musician comes in
Yeah.
and picks up on what someone else has done and does their bits. Of course,
Absolutely. Um, so he's going to tour again, hopefully. Are there songs you haven't heard him perform live that you want to hear?
that's quite a difficult question. There was one, and then he played it
Okay.
in 2008. He started 2008 with "Small Things, Mama, Are Big Things When They Come."
Yes.
Song that he gave to Dave Edmunds. He probably wrote it backstage.
Yeah.
And it's one of the few. "Open All Night" and "Small Things Mama" are two of the songs that I can play relatively well and enjoy
Okay.
doing. They're very simple,
Sure.
as are many of his songs. And he opened it in Cardiff in 2008. So I've had that one. I think I would really like to hear him on the live album from '85. There's his version of John Fogerty's "Who'll Stop the Rain."
Yeah.
I think I would really love to hear him do that.
Yeah, that's a beautiful song. I'd love to hear Jolie Blanc live. I'm
Right.
from Louisiana, and so therefore I love that version of the song. Um, The Wish was one of my on my list, and then when I got to see him in Broadway, that I was able to check that off. I agree with you. There's no way he's playing County Fair live, but
Yeah.
I would, hearing that or Lion's Den would make me just yes, because it just would be such a unique song for him to play live.
That's right. And well, so many, and I think I probably have heard almost all the songs that
Yeah.
I would like to, except of course new ones. And
Yeah,
if
exactly.
I was a priest, it's one
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, almost anything from Western Stars, anything from Letter to You. I do think that when we tour, we'll get a fair amount of Letter to You. I am thrilled that I'll See You in My Dreams ended up making the live show, though I'm jealous. Like I said, I wanted to hear that.
Yeah.
Um, Gavin, I've kept you almost an hour. What have I not asked you that I should have?
Oh, you'll have to ask me
Mary question. Yes, we'll end with the Mary question. I
the
cannot wait to hear your answer.
other thing was final thoughts. So not really. The only thing I would say is that I've always been published by Louisiana.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
That's just by chance. So I went to the Louisiana Book Festival one
Right.
just now, so we did a talk there. No, I think you've asked me all the questions.
Okay. What's next? Are you what's next? Are you I assume you're continuing to paint and continuing to explore?
I have been writing a very uh, long manuscript, which is about Paris and the Louvre and painting.
Okay.
So it's quite possible that what I'll do is something connected with that. And the interesting thing about painting for me is that it's like writing, it's a very quiet thing.
Hmm.
But they're very similar. Writing and painting are very, very similar.
Okay.
But uh, uh, it's a world away from Springsteen, but maybe it isn't. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
Because when you go in the Louvre and you walk around, you see all these people in the paintings who you think, oh, I remember that person from 81 or 93. And
Hmm.
Springsteen creates characters, and painters, portraits in particular, are all about characters. So that's the
Yeah.
connection.
Okay. If so, let's go. Jay Armstrong is an honors English teacher. He is recently retired. And he would every year his honors English class would take Thunder Road and break it apart as if it was a poem, going through the imagery, the words that Bruce uses. Often compare it to Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken.
Mhm.
And at the end of the 2 days, he asks his class, "Does Mary get in the car?" So, Gavin, that is your question. Does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
Okay, I'm going to I used to teach the Frost poem, and
Okay.
I'm going to suggest, because I've seen it used at summer camps, wrote,
Yeah.
and it sounds like a very positive thing, but of course, when you look at the poem again, it's a very negative thing.
Right.
And so I would turn the students from seeing it one way to seeing it the other. And Thunder Road, I hadn't thought about the question until you asked it. And I had always assumed, especially when I was young, that, a town full of losers pulling out of here to win, that of course she would get in the car, and go on.
Absolutely.
But I looked at the lyrics again, like a vision alone again. Don't run back inside. The door's open, but the ride ain't free. Climbing back. So it's climbing the back, and then lady says climbing the front, which is curious. And then he talks about ghosts and haunting and skeleton. And when you get to the porch, they're gone. So Mary, climb in. And so this is what I wrote about this. There's a Joyce Carol Oates story called "Where Are You Going? Where Have You Been?", which is inspired by Bob Dylan's "It's All Over Now, Baby Blue", which is a spooky thing. And this young girl is seduced to get into the car of someone called Arnold Friend, and it's not a good idea. And so I had that in mind, and it could be read as another ghost story. And I was thinking, well, I hope my daughters wouldn't get in that car. But when I was young, I was the driver pulling out to win. But then there's a lot of pressure sales. He sets a time limit on it. He says it's your last chance. And so, on balance, I would say that she doesn't get in the car. Maybe now she regrets it, but probably not. She watches his tail lights recede into the darkness down Thunder Road, lying out there like a killer in the sun. I think she was very wise not to get in. And it's also a sense in which he talks about all these other people who've tried to get her. And the assumption is that he's not like them, but he could, in fact, be the ghost of some of these people
Yeah.
too. So, like all the best art, like Frost's poem, um, you can read it two ways, depending on you. And you might read it differently at one stage in your life to at another stage in your life. But on balance, as a father, at my age now, I think she doesn't, and I think she's wise not to.
So I will send you, Gavin, when we finish. I had a lady, Bex Goose, who's a podcaster, um, on the show, and she was not a Springsteen fan, and she had actually never heard Thunder Road, and she read it almost like it was a murder mystery. And she
Mm,
was like, "Oh my goodness, no, he's going to kill her if she gets in the car." So I will send you her notes,
yeah.
because there is just the taint of that in your answer. That's a great answer. I
I think
appreciate it.
it's a slightly pervert. I mean, obviously, the surface reading is, yeah, come on.
Yeah, of course.
As we get older, we get a bit more nuanced.
Yes.
And so, what's the score in terms of whether?
So about 60-40. 60% of the people say yes, she gets in the car. And then about 40% say no. So it is, um, and there are people that go, of course, it's Bruce Springsteen asking me to get in the car. I'm going to get in. But there is a fair amount. Um, One of my favorite answers, Gavin, is someone said yes, she gets in the car and they drive to California, and that Moonlight Motel
Mm,
is the end of the story. That Mary got in the car, they went to California, they had a life, and now then he is mourning Mary's passing in Moonlight Motel.
okay, that'd be a little bit like County Fair too. Yeah.
Yes.
And I think it's also that where you start to hear Bruce differently is when you realize that he is not identical with the voice,
Right.
is he? So
Yeah.
often, and that turns it into a story and not a biography or anything.
Absolutely. And there are, there are people that say, now my one of my favorite stories is uh and I cannot remember the person's name, but he said it depends. If it's the band playing Thunder Road, she gets in the car because it ends very triumphant with Clarence's saxophone and the band playing, that absolutely she gets in the car and they're going off to their happily ever after. He said when Bruce does it by himself, there is a
Yeah.
very sad ending when he na 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 na, and that's him driving off by himself.
And that's how he ended the Paris 2016 show, at least one of them,
Yeah,
because he brings the audience down. And of course, in the end, a really curious thing happened. Again, this is in the American Lonesome, but in the middle of Ramrod
yeah,
in Paris, all the lights blew,
yeah.
just boom, and
Wow.
there suddenly, instead of the great big screens and so on and so forth, suddenly there were some fairly elderly men dressed in black on a stage, a bit like a high school prom, and their instruments wouldn't make a sound, but you still felt that Ramrod was playing. And they came round the audience. We were at this sort of buffer bit, so they came round in front, and the only one you could hear was Jake Clemens' saxophone going, and he played it. That was it.
That's
But
great.
I mentioned at the beginning of this that something very, very curious happened at that concert, and I guess when you read, if you read the book, and you're in chapter 4, when you're reading that, pay close attention to what happens what do you do when you are confronted by Bruce in front of you,
Yeah,
and your wife is shaking his hand, and
yeah.
you're face to face. What do you do? Well, I put it in the book, and then there's something else happened, and there's a footnote about it because it ends up on YouTube. But I
Okay.
will. Okay.
Well, I have bought the Kindle, and I will email you, um, and let me know if I can get a signed copy. I will send you the money and postage if you want to. If you have an extra copy of the book or can get me a copy, I would love to sign copy of the book to have for my Springsteen shelf. I have a list of the books, and so I'd love that. But yes, I just bought the Kindle version from Amazon, and I just finished a a history of Marvel comics, the publishing company. So I'm going to start your book this afternoon. So I'm looking forward to it.
Don't feel obliged.
No, no, I want to. All right. If someone wants to reach you, how can they?
Okay, so I have a website,
Okay.
gavincolognebrooks.com.
Okay.
Just type that in, and there's an email there, which is gavin@gavincolonebrooks.com.
Okay.
Delighted to hear from anybody. So,
Okay. And are you on social media at all?
yeah, I wish I'd been on Twitter when when it came out, because I'm just fascinated by the community and all the people who are on there.
Yeah,
And of course, that's how we came into contact, through that.
absolutely.
And there's a Facebook page for the website, but Twitter is the thing that I go to for an awful lot of stuff and follow a lot of what's happening.
Okay.
So it's just at Gavin Cologne.
All right, I see it. I will do that. Gavin, this is amazing. I had so much fun. I hope you did. Please, let's stay in touch, and who knows, maybe we'll have you back on again. Because I think we just scratched the beginning of the stories.
Sure. Thank you, Jesse. You're very professional about the way you coax information out of people.
Thank you. That's a very nice compliment. I have been told that by a couple of people that um, I'm a pretty good interviewer. I think it's because I think the people I'm interviewing have good stories, and I just get out of the way and let them tell it. But thank you so much.
Well,
Um,
and that's the way I've done interviewing in my time, and it's a very enjoyable thing
it is.
to
It
do.
is. Yeah. All right, listeners, you stay safe. Go get vaccinated. Let's remember to all be good to each other, because that's the only way we're going to get through this. And thank you. And Gavin, thank you much for joining me. We will talk to
Thank
you
you for
soon.
inviting me, Jesse. Have a good afternoon.
All right. And goodbye, listeners.